Could taking psychedelics make you more psychic than you ever thought possible? Would it change your life in any other way? Well, that's what author and educator Sean McNamara talks about in part 2 of our interview. If you remember from the first part of our interview, Sean shared a lot about telekinesis, or the ability to influence matter with your mind. And in fact, in our YouTube video, you can see examples of Sean doing just that. He does move objects with his mind, and he trains other people to do that as well. He says it's not that difficult, so I'm very curious. In this episode, Sean goes more into depth about his year-long study looking at the impact of psychedelics on psychic abilities like telepathy. He shares a variety of examples of sessions from his study, and he talks about the very surprising discovery that he made along the way. In fact, Sean had such a profound spiritual experience during the course of the study that it changed the course of his life's work. So Sean will talk more about this and other related topics on this episode of Curious Explorers. So if you're curious, stay tuned.
I know that the paranormal is real. Listen.
Developing your psychic abilities helps you think different because you're willing to take a chance doing something that most of the world thinks isn't real. And contradicting how reality appears, being willing to wonder, is there more? Is there something under the hood? Is there something behind the curtain? Is there something more profound than this physical reality? And then the way you have to work with your mind and your body to tune in to these psychic perceptions or to move something with your mind. You have to use your mind very differently than a person does in their day-to-day life. Psychic abilities for people are natural. I think of consciousness that way as being pervasive like gravity and time. It's just a natural thing. Too many connections there. And of course, there's always be some small percentage of my mind that's like, am I making all this up? Am I making myself crazy here? But this is in the midst of this year-long psychic experiment involving psychedelics, where there's tons and tons of evidence. And you saw that a lot of it is in the book, all these photos of the transfers.
Absolutely.
Incontrovertible
And I want you
evidence.
Yeah, I really want you to, if you don't mind, give an overview, a synopsis of the book, which people should get. It's fascinating, and it's something that you want to take your time with, most definitely, because there's so much there. I highly recommend getting the one in color as well, because the photographs and the drawings are really compelling. The whole book is compelling, but if you could start with an overview so people have a sense, like a snapshot or a window into this year-long project, because it changed your life, it sounds like, on multiple levels.
It did. So the aim of the project was to determine if psychedelics can increase someone's psychic abilities. And this came about partly because I saw an old episode from a show called One Step Beyond from the 60s. It was like the Twilight Zone, but before then, black and white. And this was a documentary episode. Most of the episodes were fictional, but this was real, documenting a visit to Mexico by Andrea Puharich and a team of researchers to meet with healers there who used psychedelic mushrooms as part of their shamanistic work. And it showed how they use it for psychic perception, like finding a donkey that had been stolen by some people in the next village. And so this was in the mid 60s, right? So the psychedelics were very new. This was shortly after Gordon Wasson went to Mexico and experienced the mushroom himself. So very shortly after that. And Andrea Puharich had already done research with Amanita muscaria, this other mushroom, to see what it could do for psychic abilities. But seeing this YouTube episode, or this episode on YouTube, got me thinking, could I pull off an experiment to see if it's true? Because in this show, he goes back to California and gives mushrooms to the show host, and they do some ESP tests. And the results are amazing. So I thought, can I recreate this in the modern age? They were in the modern age too, but we're
More
a few
modern.
decades. Yeah, we're more modern. So the first 6 months, I had a team of friends, and three of us were gonna microdose psilocybin for some of the time and amanita muscaria for some of the time. And the rest would be a control group. They would not be microdosing anything. And all of us took several ESP tests every week for 6 months. And these were the type of tests that could be measured for accuracy numerically. Some I had to judge their transcript and I would grade it. For example, if someone was doing a telepathy, they'd send me their transcript and I would grade it. Like 6 would be the top score and 0 would be no connection.
Can I just explain for people listening? Just because I want to paint a picture for people who haven't read the book yet. You had recruited, I was like 6 friends roughly. 7. How many? I forget. 7. Okay, 7 friends. And some of you would all be doing the same ESP tests of various types. And you go into detail about that in the book, and you have examples and photographs. You had periods where you would do this without any psychedelics. And then about half of you would then have I believe a 6-week period. Was that it? Where you would use a psychedelic microdosing and then repeat the experiments. But basically, when you were doing telepathy experiments, you had a sheet of paper with a design, a simple line drawing on it, often repeated, right? So it could be a line drawing of, like, you had the 2 flags that remind me of like flags that would be like, waved before a race. And you had a pair of scissors on its side. And you would not only be looking at it, trying to send the image, and they try to receive it at a distant location from you, but you would be tracing your finger over the line drawing so that there would be more than one perceptual thing that they might be able to pick up on. And then you have the drawings as, what they actually picked up on and wrote and sketched themselves. And they're uncanny.
Yeah. So those examples you mentioned, the flag and the scissors and the third one I sent you, those were actually targets that my wife picked. So she would be the sender and I was the receiver. So she was like mentally sending those images, and the drawings you see are what I picked up. And there were some other drawings, but I just picked up the best from my transcripts just to show you how close they are. But yeah, all my friends did really well with this. The way we would do it is we did it over Zoom. I'd be here at home on my laptop, and everyone was in their own home. And I would turn off the video and the audio during the period where I would send the image psychically to them, tracing my finger over the line, over the drawing. And they had 15 minutes to just write down whatever came to them. And then I turned my video and audio back on. The reason I turned it off was I didn't want them seeing my shoulder motion. I didn't want them seeing the expression on my face, anything that could give away information. I just turned all that off. So I would turn it back on when the 15 minutes was up, and then they would email me their transcripts. But it was interesting because weird things would happen sometimes, and they would also hold their transcripts up to the camera so we could see what everyone did right then and there. And there were a couple times when the same image showed up on several people's transcripts that had nothing to do with what my image was that I was sending. It came from somewhere else. I think one example was a little flag appeared on different transcripts, and I wasn't sending a flag, and their flags were eerily similar to each other. Like, where did this stuff come from? Like, there's a cloud out there, and there's just these, and Jean Millay had written about this phenomenon in her book, and it's called Psychic Soup. So when I read her book, I was like, oh my God, it's like from the spirit world, she's telling me to read her book, and I do, and it explains this weird phenomenon that's happening during our telepathy experiments, which is really cool. So that was one of the tests that we would do as a group together, but there were tests they could do at home on their own and then score or write down the results and then send it back to me. So that was the first 6 months of the experiment. At the end of the 6 months, I was left with a whole lot of psychedelic mushrooms because I'd grown the mushroom myself. Amanita muscaria, you can't cultivate it. It grows in a root system with a tree. You can't grow it at home. But psilocybin, you can. So I'd grown, and I had all these leftover mushrooms. I thought, I need to take it to the next level. I'm going to take large doses, hallucinogenic doses of the mushrooms, and other stuff and take the same tests. And the thing is, I hadn't used psychedelics since college, and I'd done them twice in college, and both times were horrible. So I was actually really scared about doing this, but I thought, if I don't do this, I'm always going to wonder what could have happened if I just taken more of the psychedelic. What would that do to my psychic abilities? So for 6 months, I did experiments with psilocybin, amanita muscaria, LSD, LSA, and DMT was the final one. And so the telepathy transcripts I sent you are from, I think, from some of the psilocybin experiments. But things happened that I didn't expect. Like, for example, with the LSD, I just had the most profound spiritual experience of my life. I was just taking these substances to improve my psychic ability, but that would happen during the first hour, hour and a half of the journey, and then I would go lay down and enjoy the rest of the experience. And I had no idea what would happen. And the most amazing things occurred during these journeys, including this profound spiritual insight that just showed me that I'm fine just as I am. It's sort of like letting the gas out, or letting the air out of a tire. It was sort of deflating in a way, but in a good way. It's the thing that has made me stop pursuing my own psychic development. And I don't know if this is what you were hinting at the beginning of the interview, but this big shift.
It was.
In my life. And just in different ways during my journeys, I just saw that the pursuit of being anything more than just the human being that I am, it's unnecessary. That to be alive, and I know that many humans have much more difficult experiences of being alive than I do. I'm very privileged. I live in America in 2024. I'm a white male, all that stuff. I have it pretty well off, but still, to have a human consciousness, to have a human body, and all the limitations that come with it, that cause us to grow and age, to connect. If we were not separate from each other, we wouldn't be able to connect with each other and produce meaning from our relationships, from our strife, from our struggle, from our search for whatever it is people look for. It's really a nice thing to be trapped in these skin bags, these bodies for a limited time. It adds that preciousness, that meaning to being alive. Because I think for a while with my psychic development, I was looking to become maybe a little bit more than human, or something special about that, or that specialness, which I think Hollywood is. It's exciting. It's different. Oh, look what I can do! Isn't that neat? And which I always try to stifle. I'm not really. I think that was a good thing from my Buddhist training to not let my ego get inflated when special things happen. But this really helped deflate it. That no, just to be alive in this universe is a beautiful miracle. And trying to constantly develop myself was becoming a source of stress too at the time. And because I'm so public about it, writing books about it and videos and interviews, people don't see what happens after that. I get bombarded by emails and messages from people wanting me to do more, or what's the heaviest thing I've ever moved, or how could they do more? And people really look to these abilities to solve all their problems, and they don't. They really don't. They don't really add a lot to a person's life unless somehow you can monetize it in some big way, or go on TV, or become famous or something like that. There's really no benefit to this except the spiritual benefit of knowing that there's more to your nature. That's the benefit, but there's no material benefit to it. But some people are like, how can I do this? I want to be superhuman, and using the psychedelics really helped me let all that go. Now, I still enjoy teaching people their psychic abilities because of that spiritual aspect of it. It helps them learn something about themselves, so it's beneficial that way. But in terms of me trying to improve my own abilities, I'm done. I'm not so concerned. I still meditate regularly because of those benefits, but it has nothing to do with psychic development. It was still beautiful to see over a year the effects or the results of everybody's psychic tests, because in many, many different ways, it showed how interconnected we are to each other and to our world, in many strange ways too. Is it okay if I describe one of the remote viewing
Yeah,
experiments?
I think that would be great. I'm nodding, constantly because everything you're saying, it makes sense. I almost feel like I am of two minds. Not that one is disagreeing and one is agreeing, but I feel like being aware of our innate psychic abilities and almost that word almost doesn't even fully capture it for me, but it reminds us that for me that we're not so separate. I mean, feeling somebody else's emotion as they're having it creates empathy in a different way than most people necessarily would feel it, and it changes how we are with each other, right?
Mhm.
It changes our tendency to want to be helpful and also not to harm. So I feel like for me that's one thing, because if somebody would say, well, why should I develop my psychic abilities, it's like, well, maybe just because we're so much more. It's like there are colors in the environment and you didn't realize they were there because you didn't, your eyes weren't attuned to them. And all of a sudden you notice them and the world seems more multidimensional. But I'm hearing you that what you're saying is you don't need that anymore because what you got is something even beyond that.
Yeah, it's very subtle, so some of it's hard to describe, and it can take a lifetime to figure out what the heck is this guy Sean talking about. Well, you have to go through it, and it takes time, and then you're like, oh, that's what he meant. A lot of this is like that. But for a lot of people, I mean, as you were saying what you were just saying, it reminded me that when I was teaching telekinesis classes regularly, I used to be surprised because 99% of the people who would come, they'd come, and in 2 hours they could do everything I could do. They just picked it up right away, but they never came back. And sometimes I would reach out like, have you kept practicing? No, they never practiced again because they got the message. They got the message and they didn't need to like recreate the experiment. They didn't need to redo their telekinesis. It's like they got it. Oh, we're connected to each other and to our world. And I think there is a value to that for society, especially in North America and maybe even in Europe and modernized cities. We're so disconnected from each other and from the earth, which is creating this crisis, or this global crisis in terms of how we treat each other and how we treat the planet. So if in a very surprising, strange, mystical way, we can show that, no, we're interconnected. We are part of each other on this non-physical plane. Could it shift the way we regard each other in our relationships and our relationship to Mother Earth? So there's that value there too. That's part of also what I teach. I also teach these things because, is it the Apple slogan, think different? I have this belief, when I think about my close friends who practice this stuff with me, developing your psychic abilities helps you think different because you're willing to take a chance doing something that most of the world thinks isn't real, and contradicting how reality appears, and being willing to wonder, is there more? Is there something under the hood? Is there something behind the curtain? Is there something more profound than this physical reality? And then the way you have to work with your mind and your body to tune in to these psychic perceptions or to move something with your mind, you have to use your mind very differently than a person does in their day-to-day life. And so it increases creativity. It supports novel thinking. And so I think people who develop psychic abilities in themselves, they're really just becoming highly creative and innovative people. And if younger people get into this, they might be the future doctors and engineers, biologists, the people who are going to help us save this planet. They need to be able to think different. So I think if they can
They
at
do.
least meditate, or if they look deeper into their mind, and psychic training does that, that'll help them in their work. So yeah, I was going to describe this remote viewing experiment that happened during the study, and this is really just a great example of how interconnected we are. There was a remote viewing experiment, and for those listening who don't know what remote viewing is, it's just clairvoyance with a protocol. The target was a picture of the Eiffel Tower that I had chosen. Nobody else knew what my targets were, and so I gave the participants a 6-digit number that represented the target. So they could focus on the number and then write down or draw on a piece of paper whatever came to them. Their goal was to perceive this picture that I had in an envelope, in their home somewhere miles away or in another state. And one participant gave me her transcript, and it showed, and so the target was the Eiffel Tower with some fireworks exploding behind it. And she drew this, I think it's an isosceles shaped triangle, but very long triangle with something behind it that looked like a circle with pizza slices in the center of it. And I thought, oh, that must be her perception of the fireworks explosion behind the Eiffel Tower.
That's what I thought when I saw it as well, because you included in your book. And I was thinking like, oh, look how cool she drew that.
Yeah, so
But your
wild.
story,
Yeah,
but
so
your
months
story
later,
about that there's more.
yeah, months later, I'm editing the book and I'm looking at all the transcripts. And I got a text message from a friend who was not part of the study, but she was studying remote viewing with someone else. And she was just sharing with me her wonderful success because the target for her was the Eiffel Tower, but there's a carousel at the Eiffel Tower. So that must have been the target. And she sent me a transcript, and it was a beautiful transcript. She picked up the carousel very well. But looking at the carousel, I thought, I have seen this before. So I went back to where in the book I'm editing, and I found the transcript from my other friend from months before and looked at that isosceles triangle with this circle with the pizza slices. And if you look at the picture of the carousel, the ceiling of it is divided like pizza slices. And the carousel is located at the Eiffel Tower. So this might be confusing. The point is, the participant had picked up on the carousel, even though it was not in the target photograph, but it's actually there at the Eiffel Tower. That's how expansive and powerful her mind was, that it knew
She was there.
It's like her mind went there. It's like, I'll give you the Eiffel Tower, and I'm going to give you this carousel too, even though it's not in your stupid
That you
little
don't know
photo.
is there yet.
Yeah, I didn't even know it was there, and her mind still picked it up. And it was verified months later because another friend was doing remote viewing and was given that target. It's like the whole thing produced meaning. Like, it seems like a random accident from one point of view. From another point of view, and it happened several times in different ways during the study, the universe is trying to say, hello, yes, it's all meaningful, and we're going to create these weird situations to point it out, like to show the meaning. We're all connected, more than you know, more than you know. So that was the lesson for me, and for me it is a very spiritual lesson, but free of the dogma of religion. It's just nature, it's just natural, and it's psychic abilities for people are natural. I think of consciousness that way as being pervasive, like gravity and time. It's just a natural thing. And it connects with our physical brains and our physical bodies. So there again, there's the intersection of consciousness and materiality. The two work together, and they connect in the individual to produce a human life. And of course, animals and plants, everything living has it, but it's experienced differently
Totally
according
agree.
to, luckily we have these human brains, the most sophisticated supercomputer in our solar system, at least, if not in the whole universe. This beautiful computer that can connect with consciousness that way.
Totally, beautifully said. Truly. And I was thinking back to your description a few minutes ago of, how you not came full circle. I don't know if it's full circle, but maybe because we come into this world, I assume we still have some memory of being, beautiful and perfect as we are, right? And that quickly gets conditioned out of us, or maybe we just forget. And here you go on this huge quest. And it's a multi-year quest, maybe multi-decade quest, to kind of find more and become more. And the pinnacle of your journey in terms of this year-long experiment is that you, again, discover that you already are there. You're already there, and you have this profound and profoundly moving realization and appreciation for all that you are. When you were talking about that, this doesn't come anywhere near describing it. I feel like language really just falls short when you're trying to describe these experiences, but just it made me think of, like, if I had to describe what you were describing to somebody, I would think of like analogy of like somebody going on a journey to every country in the world, and it's incredible and it's beautiful and it's amazing and you learn all these great things, and then you return home and you feel like moved to tears because there's something so beautiful and wonderful about just being, back home rather than in some exotic locale. That's kind of what it made me think of.
Yeah, in some traditions, there's this phrase, it's the path that need not have been taken. Because all it does is it places you right at the beginning. Like, you never needed to take this path. But at the same time, you did. I did have to do all this hard work for years and years.
I can't believe how much you put into this for decades. I mean, honestly, I'm in awe. Just the stamina. Again, to be meditating for, an hour, hoping that the paper will move or the tinfoil will move, or with that, it's the goal. It's amazing. I'm looking for a quote that you said when you were interviewed by Jeffrey Mishlove recently, because I thought it was so great. And I want everybody to know this great thing that you said. And I don't know if you were the originator of this quote, or it doesn't matter to me. It's still great that you said it. You said the top of the mountain was already present on the first step. And I just thought that's so beautiful.
I say these things and it sounds nice and it's so frustrating at the same time too. God, why did it take so much work? And it just does. I think it's just part of the human thing. And I think there are a lot of people who, they already get it. They don't need to do the work. They're like, I already know I'm fine. And that's great. For some reason, I just needed to take that journey. And maybe it was because I almost died when I was 7 years old or whatever it is. But it's enriched my life, even though the mountaintop was present at the very first step. Boy, I really enjoyed the hike. I did. And even though it was hard work, it was so much fun, aside from the frustration and the boredom. But those moments of success, like the first time I got the object to move, I felt like a 5-year-old kid on Christmas morning, The first time I had my out-of-body experience, I felt whole. That was the first time I really felt whole as a person. It was like I was connected to not just me, but something more. It's one of those experiences that's beyond words, but a sense of wholeness. And all the psychic development after that sort of connects to that sense of wholeness, tapping into something more, something beyond what the physical eyes can see, is coming home to what we really are. Not just normally we go through the day, we're a fraction of our reality, but these experiences show us that no, we're so much more. And it feels so good to be connected to ourselves. Really, we're just connecting to ourselves and to each other. And it's enriching, it's liberating, it's contentment. There's the content feeling, a sense of peace, like everything is fine. Everything is as it's supposed to be. And the psychedelics double down on that sentiment, like, yeah, everything's fine. You don't have to try and control everything. Everything's fine. Yeah. Even when it's not, it is. And even the struggle.
Beautifully said. As an aside, I just want to tell you, until recently, I was teaching at the Spirituality Mind Body Institute, which is an institute housed at Teachers College, Columbia. So it's a unique kind of institute. And the students that come there really are seeking not only to develop intellectually or academically, but on another level. And I can't tell you how many of the students in the last few years have been interested in psychedelics and the potential to be helpful and therapeutic. Therapeutic, again, as a word, doesn't really capture it fully. And another quick aside, a friend, Dr. Tony Bassas, was one of the principal investigators on a study of psychedelics for patients who were, had received a terminal diagnosis. They know that their time is limited. That very understandably generates all kinds of anxiety and other emotions. And largely, the very thoughtfully controlled and supervised use of psychedelics with this population, and they got therapy as well, but people describe things like not only losing the fear of dying, but finding so much meaning in their daily life in the smallest things, feeling so connected to everyone else and feeling such love feeling such, increased self-acceptance. And so even though your original aim was maybe focused more on psychic development, at which I am not minimizing or knocking at all, but it sounds like what you experienced is something that many other people have reported their own version of. And honestly, I'm glad you've taken the journey you've taken, because what you've learned is something that many other people can now learn from you. You have the path of the golden teacher. Do you want to talk about that?
The next frontier, it is kind of a happy accident that the Buharj project that Dewdrops Infinity is based on, my focus was about psychic abilities, but it ended with these spiritual insights for me. And along the way with microdosing, it also greatly reduced my anxiety and depression that I didn't even know I had until I had microdosed for a couple of months. And I woke up, I was like, I feel happy. I had to check in with my wife. Is this how normal people feel? She's like, yeah, that's not normal. I can't remember the last time I felt this way consistently. It had just evaporated. I'd learned to live with this blanket of depression and anxiety, not even knowing that I was wearing it. But I felt the weight lift off because of the microdosing. So I wanted to go further with that, and I have, and now and part of what happened is some of the spiritual insights that I got on psychedelics, I see were the result of years and years and years of meditating in the Buddhist tradition that I was part of. But without the psychedelic, the results weren't coming. Then on the psychedelic, in the journey, it was like the fruition of all that hard work. And I thought, I think this is it. I think, of course, many ancient societies use psychedelics, and things changed after Nixon in the 70s shut that down. But I thought, I want to provide a path for people to combine meditation with psychedelics. A lot of people don't even know how to meditate, or they have very little experience. Could I offer a really complete path that they would practice for a substantial amount of time, and then take a psychedelic either along the way or at the end? And so I'm talking about months or even years of practicing meditation, and then taking the psychedelic to bring to fruition all their hard work, hours and hours and hours and hours of meditation. Could it help the same thing happen for them that happened for me? So the book talks about meditation in general. It talks about the techniques that I teach, and the book's a companion to an online guided meditation program, but people could use the book without the program. They might already have their own path, and that's fine. Then they can incorporate their own meditation path into this. So this is just guidance on how to use psychedelics, how to meditate, how to do them together. The book even includes instructions on how to grow psilocybin. It's going to have instructions on how to extract DMT, because there are instructions on the internet, but they're not very clear. And this will have photos and everything to take you step by step. So it's sort of an all-in-one, like how to really have a profound spiritual experience with the aid of psychedelics. And there's also a portion there on microdosing for mental health, how to do it. Because that word microdosing is everywhere these days. And about half the time I hear it being used the wrong way. And people are they're suggesting dosages that are highly inappropriate. They're too much. And you can't just use those numbers loosely. This is subtle stuff. So this book is
And you are a licensed therapist. I just want to let people know. So you actually have training in an investment in helping people improve their mental health.
Mm-hmm. And this is harm reduction. The book, in a sense, is a harm reduction project to educate people, to help them be safe, to help them benefit psychologically and spiritually. And the book addresses issues too, like spiritual bypassing. And I also use the phrase psychedelic bypassing, because I found over the years, meditation doesn't necessarily make you a better person. And psychedelics certainly don't make someone a better person. I've known people do both, meditating and use psychedelics, and maybe they have some particularly nasty characteristics about themselves that don't just get better or disappear. If someone's a jerk, meditating is not going to change them to being a nice person. If someone's a jerk, tripping out on mushrooms is not going to make them not a jerk, at least in some cases, So it's important that people come to meditation and psychedelics with the right expectations, because sometimes, and right now, especially with psychedelics, it's almost like they're a cure-all. They fix everything. You got a problem, the mushroom is going to fix it. DMT is going to fix it. Whatever is going to fix it. That is not true. We're still at the early stages. There are many scientific studies that need to be done to really show definitively what can be helped with psychedelics. So it's a time of experimentation. We need more studies. So the book is also how to do your own research, how to do your own, how to work with yourself carefully, especially with dosing. Because when you pay someone to have a psychedelic journey, you probably paid a lot of money, and that person who is selling you the service, they want to make sure you have a strong experience. So they're going to give you a nice big dose, and it could be much more than you really needed. But if you are independent, if you learn how to cultivate your own mushrooms, then you can take all the time in the world to figure out what dose is right for you. So start small and work your way up over time. Be patient. Be patient. That's a big thing. Be patient with this. And then it can be safe. You avoid a lot of problems that can happen with psychedelics that I think are not talked about enough. And also with meditation too. And there are a lot of problems that people don't talk about, a lot of risks there. In the book, I talk about a friend of mine who I taught him how to meditate. We were in our 20s, so this is a long time ago. And I didn't know that he had a history of mental illness. Somehow we've been friends for a couple years, but he didn't tell me that. And after I taught him to meditate, I found out maybe a couple years later, we got reconnected because we lost touch, and I didn't know why. Well, we lost touch because at one point he was meditating and he had a psychotic break, and he ended up scrubbing the floor of his kitchen with a toothbrush. He had a break, and his mom found him, and so he ended up being hospitalized for a long time. Now, did meditation cause that break? Maybe, but he was also prone to it. He could have been watching TV that day and still would have had a psychotic break. So it's hard to tell. But people don't know meditation can bring up some of the same issues that psychedelics can.
I'm glad you're saying that. Meditation, I think of, is largely safe for most people, but certainly somebody who finds even just that they get extra anxious when they're meditating, that's the time to kind of reach out to a professional. And just generally, when we're not feeling centered, we don't have to, or balanced, or something doesn't feel okay, it's important to reach out to someone who's qualified to help. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because there are some people who should not experiment with substances generally, or should not sit for an hour focusing on their breathing. When Lynn Buchanan was on, I said, who shouldn't do this? And I have this idea in my own mind too. But, he said basically what you said too, somebody who's really vulnerable in terms of mental illness, that is not the person you want to say, all right, sit for an hour and try and tune into some esoteric target. But it sounds like you're giving people a lot of information that would be very hard for them to glean otherwise. You've spent a ton of time. You've tested these things out yourself. You've looked at the research, and you talk about both meditation and psychedelics in a clear way. You have suggested protocols. So that's a much clearer guidebook than what people will find just surfing the net. Or, like you said, paying a gazillion bucks to go to somebody who wants to make sure they really feel something.
Right.
Sean, I want to ask you, is there anything that we didn't cover, or that I didn't ask you, that we should be sure to cover today?
No, but you're a psychologist, right? And I'm a therapist. And something that's coming up for me, because I'm a new therapist, this is recent for me. But a lot of people know me because of my spiritual work as a meditation teacher, and then a psychic development teacher. And one thing I'm seeing is a lot of people go to spirituality or psychic stuff or the new age scene because they're looking for help. And now, having gotten my master's degree and seeing people in therapy, seeing clients, some of them coming from that spiritual world, this is my chance to say to listeners.
Yeah, definitely.
Sometimes going to the psychic fair to get a reading can be helpful. but in many cases, you might want to consider seeing a professional psychologist like you, Tracy, or a licensed professional counselor like me. See a trained professional whose methods are based in evidence-based methodologies. That can be really helpful, because now I'm looking back all the years that I've been in the spiritual scene, seeing a lot of people looking for help. They have issues. That getting a psychic reading does not solve a lot of these issues. And I've had psychic readings myself, so I'm a fan. I think there's valuable stuff there. And same thing for people who go to psychedelics to fix all their problems. No, you consider seeing a trained professional and developing what's called a therapeutic relationship, where you share your story, your narrative. You feel heard. You feel connected to another person who you trust, and they have methodologies and techniques that can benefit you to really help with whatever challenge you're facing. And I would say the same thing to people who go to spiritual groups to learn how to meditate to try and fix their problems. One of my Buddhist
100%.
teachers told me to go see a therapist, because he saw after years that there's stuff that I was thinking and doing that no amount of meditation was going to fix. So he said, you want to keep working with me, go see a therapist. And I did, and I loved it. I love therapy. So just since you and I are both in the psychology world that way as professionals, I just want to encourage people, because some listeners will just, their go-to is using a psychedelic or going to a psychic. Well,
100%.
And use them both. I'm not saying reject what you already like, but there's science. There's some good things to science.
100%. Yeah, I always think of like health and well-being and mental health. It's like, all these components are like spokes on a wheel, or pieces of the pie. For the wheel to have integrity, you need all of the spokes to be solid. So you can hear Princess scratching my chair trying to come up. For all the pet lovers. Yeah, I've noticed that as well. You and I could probably have like a 5-hour conversation about the potential pitfalls in many realms, including the therapy realm. Like, you need to make sure that the person you're sitting across from feels like they actually do have your best interest in mind, and that they are well trained, and that it feels like the right fit for you. And I think where the meditation and intuitive training can be helpful other spokes on the wheel is they help you learn to recognize and trust your gut, your own kind of inner voice, your own kind of inner divinity.
That's so true, because so many of us have grown up to be disempowered. We've lost our autonomy, maybe because of an abusive parent, or because of society, or because of social media. And definitely exploring your intuitive skills and your psychic abilities is a form of self-empowerment. Realizing that you can trust yourself, and you have the right to trust yourself and follow your own direction. So I'm just agreeing with you that, there are benefits there too.
Thank you. Sean, I could talk with you for hours, but I don't want to keep you. It's actually a Friday evening, so I hope you're going to do something enjoyable, even if whether it's, going out or not. But I want you to know how much I appreciate your taking the time to be with me and share all of your experience and knowledge and wisdom and heart with everyone who will be listening and viewing. I will include, do you see her behind me?
Hey there.
So for whoever's listening, Princess is the most, like, if I'm doing therapy or doing an interview, she's so attuned to other people's energy. She's like, no, I want to be part of the action. But thank you so much. Really, such a pleasure. I'm assuming and hoping our paths will cross again. We have a lot of similar interests.
Well, you're welcome, and thanks for inviting me on. I really enjoyed chatting with you.
Oh, my pleasure. This has been another episode of Curious Explorers. If you enjoyed the show, please remember to like, share, follow, leave us a comment. Let us know what you want more of. To learn more about Sean McNamara and his work as a counselor, psychedelic expert, psychokinesis, and telepathy teacher, visit mindpossible.com. And as always, until next time, stay curious and be well.